Welcome to True Crime and Coke. I am your host, Eve, and this podcast is about true crime, disappearances, conspiracies, hauntings, and anything strange or unusual, all while drinking an excessive amount of Diet Coke. If you have a story to share, I would love to hear and feature it on a future episode. Just email me at truecrimeandcoke@gmail.com and put which category it is in the subject line. If you enjoy this podcast and want it to continue, please rate me 5 stars, tell your friends about me, and consider supporting me on Patreon under True Crime and Coke. Now that that's out of the way, let's begin. Hello, welcome to True Crime and Coke. I am Eve, and this is my first podcast, so welcome, and I apologize in advance for all the editing mistakes and probably everything else. I am recording outside as I am quarantined, and my family is inside, so I kind of have no choice but to do it out here. So you will hear birds, my neighbor's donkeys and chickens, and possibly turkeys and lawnmowers. Who knows what you'll hear. And if any deer walk by, I will get really excited and scream in your ear, and I will try to edit that out, but no promises. So for my first episode, I decided to talk about serial killer facts. Most of the information I'm sure you already know if you are into true crime, but I thought it would be a good basis to start. So this first episode is probably going to be boring. Okay, so let's just start. Serial killers versus mass murderers. A serial killer is conventionally defined as a person who murders 3 or more people in a period of over a month, with a cooling down time between murders. For a serial killer, the murders must be separate events which are most often driven by a psychological thrill or pleasure. Mass murderers kill many people typically at the same time in a single location. With some exceptions, many mass murders end with the death of perpetrators either by self-infliction or by law enforcement. Serial killers often lack empathy and guilt and most often become egocentric individuals. These characteristics classify certain serial killers as psychopaths. Serial killers often employ a mask of sanity to hide their true psychopathic tendencies and appear normal, even charming. The most notable example of a charming serial killer is Ted Bundy, who would fake an injury to appear harmless to his victims. Ted Bundy is classified as an organized serial killer. He methodically planned out his murder and generally stalked his victims for several weeks before committing the crime. He committed an estimated 30 murders from 1974 to 1978 before his eventual capture. Serial killers such as Ted Bundy are known to be organized and psychologically motivated to commit murder, which separates them from mass murderers who appear to kill randomly at one time. And of course, there will be a Ted Bundy episode or episodes in the future. According to Michael Stone, who is a professor of psychiatry at Columbia, mass murderers are generally dissatisfied people and have poor social skills and few friends. I checked 2 of those boxes. Generally, the motives of mass murderers are less obvious than those of serial killers. According to Stone, 96.5% of mass murderers are male, and most of them are not clinically psychotic. Rather than being a psychopath like most serial killers, mass murderers tend to be paranoid individuals with acute behavioral or social disorders. Like serial killers, mass murderers also display psychopathic tendencies, such as being cruel, manipulative, and uncompassionate. However, most mass murderers are social misfits or loners who are triggered by some uncontrollable event. Serial killers and mass murderers often display the same characteristics of manipulation and lack of empathy. What differentiates the two is the timing and numbers of the murders. Serial killers commit murder over a long period of time and often in different places, while mass murderers kill within a single location and time frame. So that is the difference between serial killer and a mass murderer. Let's talk about the different types of serial killers. Currently, there are 4 main types of serial killers, and many have different subcategories. Organized serial killers tend to be rather intelligent, usually having IQ scores ranging from 105 to 120. Every detail of their crime is planned out well in advance, and the killer takes every precaution to make sure they leave no evidence behind to link them to a murder. It is not uncommon for this type of psychopath to watch potential victims for days to find someone they consider a good target. Disorganized serial killers, on the other hand, tend to have lower IQ scores than average, ranging from 80 to 95. These kind of killers rarely plan out their actions, and they appear to kill at random, usually people that happen to be at the wrong place at the wrong time. They usually do not take the extra precautions to cover up or remove any evidence of the crime, and they tend to travel from state to state or even to other countries to avoid being captured by the authorities. The 4 main types of serial killers based by the type of crime they commit are thrill seekers, mission-oriented, vision killers, and power control seekers. Thrill seekers are serial killers that see outsmarting the law as some sort of amusement. They enjoy attention from the media, and they also enjoy being pursued by the police. They can be distinguished from other serial killers because of the fact they send messages to others and they keep detailed records of their killings. Because of this, it is logical to say that most thrill seekers can be categorized as organized, but at the same time, they do not always plan everything out in advance. For that, they are also seen as unorganized killers. Thrill seekers typically use weapons and/or rape their victims before killing them. After that, they hide the victim's corpse and they move on to their next victim. That is, unless, of course, they are caught in the act of doing so. Mission-oriented serial killers are killers that feel that they are doing society a favor by ridding it of certain people. These can include young women, prostitutes, drug dealers, or homosexuals, people they feel that society could do without. These killers are generally not psychotic. Some see themselves as trying to change society. They always have a controlled crime scene, hence categorizing them as organized makes them much easier to track. However, since these killers always go after specific victims, this makes them much easier to track down. Visionary serial killers are people that occasionally suffer from psychotic breaks from society. They sometimes believe they are another person or that they are compelled to murder by higher entities such as God or the devil. In fact, 2 most common subcategories for visionary serial killers are demon-mandated and God-mandated. David Berkowitz is an example of such a killer. He had claimed that a demon transmitted orders to him through his neighbor's dog that told him to kill. Since visionary killers tend to be more unorganized than other killers. They are very easy to track down. Power and control serial killers enjoy their victims' terror, suffering, and screaming. These killers tend to be very organized, and they usually have a history of childhood abuse, which left them feeling powerless and inadequate as adults. Many of these killers also sexually abuse their victims, but they are not motivated by feelings of lust. To them, rape is simply another form of dominating the victim. Besides these 4 basic categories, there are also dozens of other subcategories that make serial killers unique based on their killing rituals and the nature of their crime. For example, Black Widow is the title given to female serial killers because it is known that a female black widow spider always kills and digests its mate after laying her eggs. There are also serial killers that kill another person after already killing someone else. These kind of serial killers are called spree killers. Lust killers are serial killers that harm their victims largely for sexual arousal. And there are killers that form clubs that kill for sacrifice and acceptance into the group. These are called group killers, but are more commonly referred to as cults. There is also the medical killer. This type of killer is very rare. There have been some people who have become involved in the medical industry to carry out these deeds. This type of killer feels they are shrouded because it isn't uncommon for people to pass in a hospital. They are usually highly intelligent and know how to carefully and cleverly conceal their murders. If it appears that a victim has died a natural death, there will be no reason for anyone to suspect foul play and search for the guilty party. Few doctors in history have managed to kill dozens of people before others began to catch on. There's also a comfort or profit type of killer. Material gain and a comfortable lifestyle are the primary motives of comfort killers. Usually, the victims are family members and close acquaintances. After a murder, a comfort killer will usually wait for a period of time before killing again to allow any suspicions by family or authorities to subside. They often use poison, most notably arsenic, to kill their victims. Female serial killers are often comfort killers, although not all comfort killers are female. Serial killers can also keep mementos of their victims once they are dead. Robert Capel, an American detective in law enforcement who is now retired, placed these collections into 2 categories: souvenirs and trophies. Souvenirs are personal items which allow the killer to enjoy their memories of particular crimes they committed. These can be things such as jewelry, body parts, and other items pertaining to the victim. Trophies are objects that serial killers can make into a shrine, forming a collection of particular items from their past crimes. Let's talk about characteristics of serial killers. The racial demographics regarding serial killers are often a subject of debate. In the United States, the majority of reported and investigated serial killers are white males from a lower to middle class background, usually in their late 20s to early 30s. However, there are African American, Asian, Hispanic, or any race of serial killers as well. According to the FBI, based on percentages of the U.S. population, whites are not more likely than other races to be serial killers. It's usually the media that likes to showcase the white American family with the pretty female who got murdered by a white male who fits the demographic. And that's kind of where the serial killers are always white myth may have become truth because of the overreporting of white serial killers in the media. I think with the recent investigation into Samuel Little's past murders, I think this will definitely change statistics because he so far has the highest verified count in the U.S. of murders. And right now they are continuing to investigate other ones. He is super interesting. He has a photographic memory and he is able to draw what his victims looked like. And a lot of the victims have been identified by their family members after seeing one of his drawings. He also can remember pretty much to the exact timing and detail of how, where, and when he committed a murder, and he enjoys talking about it. So right now they are trying to hurry before he dies, as he is in ill health, to get as much information as they can. So I will be doing an episode on him in the future. I think he is very interesting. Some other typical characteristics of serial killers include a low average intelligence. A sample of 174 IQs of serial killers had a median IQ of 93. Only serial killers who use bombs have IQs significantly above the population mean. Often, they have trouble staying employed and tend to work in menial jobs. The FBI, however, states, serial murders are often seem normal, have families and/or a steady job. Other sources state they often come from unstable families, and as children, they are often abandoned by their fathers and raised by domineering mothers. Their families often have criminal, psychiatric, and/or alcoholic histories. They were often abused emotionally, physically, and/or sexually by a family member. They may have high rates of suicide attempts. From an early age, many are intensely interested in voyeurism, fetishism, and sadomasochistic pornography. Fetishism, partialism, and necrophilia are paraphilias which involve a strong tendency to experience the object of erotic interest, almost as if it were a physical representation of the symbolized body. Individuals engage in paraphilias, which are organized along a continuum, participating in varying levels of fantasy, perhaps by focusing on body parts, which is partialism, symbolic objects which serve as physical extensions of the body, which is fetishism, or the anatomically physicality of the human body, specifically regarding its inner parts and sexual organs. One example being necrophilia. A disproportionate number often display 3 of the MacDonald triad of predictors of psychopathy. Many are fascinated with fire setting. They are involved in sadistic activity, especially in children who have not reached sexual maturity. This activity may take the form of torturing animals. More than 60% wet their beds beyond the age of 12. However, recent authorities question or deny the statistical significance of this figure. They were often bullied as children. Some were involved in petty crimes such as theft, fraud, vandalism, dishonesty, or similar offenses. Let's talk about 9 early warning signs for serial killers. Just remember, these traits and signs are just a guideline, so think twice before thinking your kid's going to be a serial killer or that your weird neighbor is going to be a serial killer. Number 1 is antisocial behavior. Psychopaths have a strong tendency toward antisocial behavior, so watch for extremely antisocial children, which I was. That being said, some children develop more slowly, and this is not a definitive sign. Pay attention if a child regresses from being extremely social to extremely antisocial. Ed Gein, who was the inspiration for Psycho's Norman Bates in Silence of the Lambs' Buffalo Bill, had no social connections besides his extremely religious and abusive mother, who punished him whenever he tried to make friends. After she died in 1945, Gein began to murder and dig up graves, collecting body parts of women who looked like his mother and trying to make a woman's suit. And of course, I will do a future episode on him. The second characteristic or early warning sign is arson. Many serial killers start as arsonists. Arson is psychologically attractive because it involves manipulating power and control, something that serial killing also offers. The third warning sign is torturing of small animals. This is one of the strongest warning signs. Children who torture or kill small animals like squirrels, birds, cats, and dogs without showing remorse are highly likely to be sociopaths. Many serial killers kill to control others' lives, and as children, small animals are the only lives they have the power to control. Cannibalistic serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer would bike around the woods as a child, collecting dead animals to dissect. Dahmer even killed and dismembered his own puppy, mounting its head on a stake when he was done. Another warning sign is a poor family life. Many serial killers come from unstable families with criminal, psychiatric, or alcoholic histories. These killers often have terrible relationships with their families and often use them as their first victims. One example is Ed Kemper, also known as the co-ed killer. He was only 15 when he killed his grandparents. After being released at age 21, Kemper killed 6 female college students. The police finally caught him when Kemper killed his violent, alcoholic mother. He treated his mother's corpse particularly brutally, decapitating her, using her head as a dartboard, and throwing her vocal cords down the garbage disposal. And he also did some really kinky stuff with her head that I will feature on a future episode in great detail. The 5th warning sign is childhood abuse. Many serial killers are abused physically, psychologically, and sexually as children by a close member of their family. This behavior instills in the child feelings of humiliation and helplessness, feelings which they will later seek to instill in their victims. One example is Eileen Wuornos. She was a prostitute serial killer, and she was abandoned by her mother when she was 4. She never met her father because he was serving time in prison for raping a 7-year-old girl when Eileen was born. Eileen's grandfather took over Eileen's care when her mother left, and he physically and sexually abused her until she ran away at age 15. And of course, we will feature her on a future episode. The 6th warning sign is substance abuse. Many serial killers struggle with drug and alcohol abuse. For example, Jeffrey Dahmer began drinking in his teens and was an alcoholic by his high school graduation. His alcoholism resulted in both his expulsion from college and his discharge from the military. The 7th warning sign is voyeurism. From a young age, many serial killers are interested in voyeurism, sadomasochistic pornography, and fetishism. Ted Bundy claimed that as an adolescent, he would get drunk and stalk around his community at night, looking for undressing women or other titillating sights. The 8th warning sign is intelligence. Many serial killers have IQs in the bright normal range, have an average IQ of 113, while disorganized serial killers are the ones that have the average IQ of 93. Ed Kemper, he had an IQ of 136. It's possible that he was 140, and that is usually the genius mark in IQ test. He used his intelligence to convince psychiatrists to release him after serving only 5 years for his grandparents' murders, claiming to have reformed. He hadn't, and he killed more women before being caught again. The 9th warning sign is shiftlessness. Despite higher than normal intelligence, many serial killers have trouble keeping jobs or work in unskilled labor. For instance, after leaving the military, David Berkowitz, who reportedly was of above average intelligence, held several blue-collar jobs before he was captured, including his last one as a postman. Now let's talk about 10 professions that attract the most psychopaths. Despite the fact that only 1% of the overall population qualifies as psychopaths, they surround us. It could be your neighbor, coworker, or even a relative. The majority of psychopaths are walking among us, immersed in careers that nurture their psychopathic traits, and in some cases even reward them. Psychopathy is a set of ingrained personality traits which can lead to a horrific killer or simply to a ruthlessly determined business person. This is why CEO leads the list in professions that psychopaths are attracted to. Being risk seekers, impulsive and fearless, help entrepreneurs lead and succeed, and the corporate lexicon is full of bloodthirsty metaphors. Business is cutthroat. Those who succeed are sharks, and they make a killing. Various studies suggest that 4% of CEOs qualify as psychopaths. They understand how to use people for the most gain. They're master manipulators with an inflated sense of self-worth. In the eyes of most people, these are essential traits of successful entrepreneurs. Being a lawyer is another profession psychopaths are attracted to, and it actually does make sense. Most lawyers will do anything to benefit at any cost, turning on their charm and lying without conscience. Ted Bundy is an example. As you all probably know, he studied law, he represented himself in court, and he actually impressed the judge that he was on the trial with. Psychopaths are also drawn to the media. It's a great place for their personalities to shine if they're narcissistic. Psychopaths are also drawn to being a salesperson. As John Clark, the author of Working with Monsters, How to Identify and Protect Yourself from Workplace Psychopaths, said, the psychopath is very likely to be a good salesperson if they are intelligent as well as glib and superficial. In fact, a study done in 2001 by Mark Hamer found that superior sales performance was associated with higher levels of narcissism, sociopathy, and cognitive empathy. The problem with psychopathic salespeople, though, is that you're bound to run into issues with their me attitude, as Clark points out. In the long term, psychopaths let their clients down. In addition, the psychopath who is a salesperson is likely to exploit the system in some way to benefit themselves. For example, they may steal products or sell them at a discount rate to their friends. Psychopaths are also drawn to being a surgeon. As Wen Shen stated in a 2014 Pacific Standard, the trouble with surgeons is many are abrasive, abusive, and wildly self-centered, so much so that observers have speculated that they suffer from psychiatric disorders. In other words, every surgeon is a true killer who has found a socially acceptable way to express his desire. Psychopaths are also drawn to journalism. Seeing their name in newspapers and articles just feeds their narcissist ways. Many serial killers are also fascinated by authority. So a lot of psychopaths tend to be police officers, security guards, or have served in the military. Many of them, such as Ted Bundy, the Hillside Stranglers, and John Wayne Gacy, they have disguised themselves as law enforcement to gain access to victims. Gerald Schaefer is one, and I will do a future episode on him. He is very sick, and he actually was a police officer, so he was able to use his badge to get several of his victims. Psychopaths are also attracted to careers in the clergy. Religious organizations provide easy access to victims, a source for financial rewards and easy legitimacy based on having an ordained position. Being a chef is another profession that psychopaths are drawn to. In one of Gordon Ramsay's interviews, which you all know he's a British celebrity chef, he says, chefs are nutters. They're all self-obsessed, delicate, dainty, insecure little souls and absolute psychopaths, every last one of them. And the conditions they work in would definitely drive most of us crazy. I know I can barely even cook a meal at home, so yeah. Civil service is the last of the professions that psychopaths are attracted to. Since they crave power and control, there's certainly power in certain civil service roles and the ability to ruin other people's lives. The BTK killer, Dennis Rader, was a census field operations supervisor in his home state of Kansas. Neighbors recalled Rader as sometimes being overzealous and extremely strict. One neighbor complained that he euthanized her dog for no reason. So that's it. That's some basic information about serial killers. How many serial killers do you think are currently on the loose? Well, some say that there's 2,000, and some say that there's only been 115 serial killers dating back to the 70s. So it's really an unknown number. But next episode, I will get into some of the current serial killers that are on the loose and possibly still active. So that's it. That was my first episode. If you're still here, thank you. Thank you for making it this far. I hope each episode will get better and more interesting. I plan on going into extreme graphic detail of murders I talk about, going into autopsy reports, just hearing some things that you don't normally hear on a podcast. So I hope you stay with me, and I hope to continue to get to do this. So thank you and have a good evening.